Welcome to Whiteboard Wednesday. My name is Mike Cromwell.
I'm Brian DeVault.
Let's look at CompuCom last year. Prime example where you take them down, and I think you and I started hearing rumblings from
Their customers.
clients, from their customers, went and did Google searches, searched the forums, not a peep on it until like the next day when you started seeing it hit the news. But in that scenario, so you hit these MSPs, you're hitting their customers as well that are underneath. And you've seen MSPs that support municipalities. MSP goes down, municipalities go down. So it's big business. And so you think is it a combination of these in those scenarios?
No, those are definitely targeted attacks. They're financially driven. They're demanding, tens of or hundreds of millions of dollars, to remediate the situation.
And they're paying it because,
and in most cases, they'll end up
because out of compliance, risk of their data being on critical client data being released, and when we go back to that other slide that we had when we talked about the risks, right? If you took that as a prime example, I know for a fact that CompuCom lost clients through that breach. Most times you have extended breaches, you lose clients. What's the cost of future business? Companies that we're considering
reputation.
Cost of your reputation. That because of that, you're not going to get it lessens your chance of winning future business.
Well, we're still seeing fallout from that today on clients whose contracts are expiring with that service provider. So, and they're basically coming to us and saying, it may not be you, but it's not going to be them.
Right. And as part of that, the interesting thing I found is that enterprise clients, if they're not already, they ought to be asking, and they're going to outsource the management of their cybersecurity to an MSP and MSSP. These things are not only important to understand for their own business, but the company you're going to trust the management of your security to. How are they on these things?
Yes. And what we're seeing more and more, and for us, it's not a problem because we maintain all of this documentation. We keep it up to date. We audit it. We measure against it, all those things. But what we are seeing more and more, and really I'd say on a daily basis, is when companies are coming to us saying either manage our infrastructure or manage our cybersecurity, they're asking these questions. Do you have compliance and regulation in place? What are your governance and controls look like? What's your data protection strategy? What's your InfoSec strategy? When was the last time you audited your environment using penetration testing or network and security assessments? All of those questions are really even part of the bid process. It's not part of the award process. It's part of the, how are you postured as an organization to provide service for my organization? Because bringing it, and we talk about vendors and contractors in our cybersecurity series, if you recall, but you're exactly right. Putting your vendors and contractors through this level of due diligence is an absolute requirement. Yeah, I mean, if your focus is your internal security, then you'd be remiss if you didn't ask the service provider that's coming in to provide that for you at a cost what theirs look like.
And you've seen a lot of the companies that are talking to Netrio come in. How many of them are asking about Netrio's security?
A lot of them. I think the awareness is way up there. This is another line graph, if you would, where you've got awareness is very high, maturity is very low still. And so there's a lot of that educational process we're having to do along the way to say, okay, you're asking me about this, but what you really need to understand is the way this works.
If this is the skill of the hacker, this is the business that's great. This is the business that's, let's say, not great or substandard. If you're to draw a line of the cybersecurity good guys, folks in the marketplace for hiring talent that are cybersecurity experts that can mitigate the risk inside of a business, what's the cyber skill, or what's the marketplace look like for folks that are knowledgeable in managing cybersecurity in an IT environment?
So I think that's a multi-pronged question, right? Because you have a group of CISOs who are highly mature on the subject, highly educated on the subject. They understand the operational controls that go into it, the governance that goes into it, all the tactical application of software and security. But then you have their ability to hire the people to go do it.
And that's what I'm trying to get to.
Okay.
So what's the marketplace
the people
look
that
like?
go do
What's
it?
the market for that look like?
Yeah,
If
I
you're
mean,
gonna draw that
it's
on.
highly, highly competitive, for sure. But it's definitely lagging behind I'd say the line of the hacker for sure. So it's probably somewhere right in the middle.
And because of that, it's a typical supply demand curve, right?
Yep.
These folks are very expensive and hot in demand because of the risks. And how big of a driver is that in companies entrusting MSSPs to manage that aspect of their business?
Well, and I think that's kind of where you see the divide between companies that are outsourcing cybersecurity and companies that are insourcing it or trying to do it in-house. And they're starting to realize that there's this gap here between good and great, if you will. And an MSSP has the accountability attached to service contracts and SLAs and all those things. And that's really the difference between here, right? Because where organizations achieve substandard results, they have substandard process and procedure and SLA and accountability defined internally. And the only way you get there, or the only way you get here, is by having a high degree of operational maturity and having those processes and procedures in place that raise you up to that level.
Right. So thanks for tuning in. We're going to be over the course of the next few weeks talking about actions that you can take if you're an executive in a business, whether you're a CISO, a CEO, on the board, tactics and actions that you can take to both assess your current level of risk, as well as actions you can take to close the gap from being at high risk to lower risk and having a good cut posture in place.
You bet. So we're going to talk about business process, business procedure, discussions you should be having internally, and then hopefully we'll be able to get into some tactical tools and some platforms that you can use to help increase your cybersecurity posture.
And if you haven't already talked to an MSSP, reach out to NetTrio. We are certainly here to help. And we can also walk you through what are things you got to look for if you're needing help today and you want to enlist an MSSP. Objective things that you ought to be looking for, tools that you can use to help assess your current level of risk.
Absolutely.
So thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned for next week's Whiteboard Wednesday.
Thanks. If you liked our episode today, click here to subscribe. And for other NetTrio content, check out our channel.